So I'm going to hand it straight over to the audience to start off with for a first question, a proposed solution.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jim Craig. I'm with the, I'm here representing LEED, I guess is the best way to say it, although I am with the U.S. Green Building Council. Happy to be here. It's great to be here. I love coming to the EU to discuss these topics. It's very important to the groups in our organization, building LEED and going to the next level. And really the question I have for the panel, and it's very refreshing to hear the emphasis on performance. And I wanted to ask, is the EU ready for performance-based certification, as it were, as opposed to the current static plaque-based performance, or static plaque-based certification schemes that there are many in the EU. There are, of course, is LEED and BREEAM and others, leadership standards. And the question is really in the context of the LEED group has spent and is now launching really a building performance-based scheme called the LEED Dynamic Plaque. And our issue is the market ready for it? Does the market want a holistic, comparable, global measurement device that really gets to not only energy but water, waste, transportation, the human experience? I mean, Miles made a great point about investors and tenants care about the performance of the people in the building. So, I guess the question is the market ready for performance-based certification, crossing areas beyond energy into water, transportation, human experience?
Thanks, Jim.
Well, what I could answer is not that the market is ready, it's that the market is already dealing with performance building, because this is how we assess our building every day. When I want to invest in a building, I look at the quality and the performance of a building. So for the moment, because I have a very bad thermometer, I can't tell you that the temperature of a body is 36 or 41. So I do it like this. I look at the building and I say, well, it seems that there is no fever, so it should be good. So what we are asking now is a more accurate system that can tell us what is the quality of a building. So I don't want someone to tell me that the performance is with 2 digits after the numbers. I want someone who tell me what is the sensitivity of my building, because, as I said, this is what the financial investors are doing every day, assessing risk, managing uncertainty. So we need and the certification scheme came on that, saying we can give you a more detailed vision about the quality of a building by the certification. But we all know that the static certification, as it is now, has some limits, because it gives a first way of information, a first set of information, and we need that if we want to go further and implement it into our financial tools, we need a little bit more different tools that could be plugged into the financial way. So again, this is not if the market is ready or not, it's just that the market is working. If you ask me if a body is ready to have a thermometer or not, well, this is the only image I could have.
I think we're heading in that direction. At least from my perspective, we see some competition now in in greening the property market in Sweden. And since we want to be a leader and we still want to have the benefits of being the greenest company, I think it would definitely be interesting for us to show the actual performance real time. And I think it would be interesting for tenants, and also when it comes to selling properties and also valuating them.
This is, I guess I'm next. I think to your question, is the market ready? We have to think, but what is the market? And it's a very complex market. There are, as we've seen and heard, a number of organizations who are keen to obtain early mover advantage in some respects. But one of the things that really concerns me is that we see here amongst us some of those organizations who are taking early mover advantage and are being more radical in terms of how they identify whether performance-based metrics exist and can be used. But there is a very, very, very long tail of organizations who aren't yet involved in this area, nor indeed are they ready to be involved in this area. And typically, although not exclusively, but typically that means small organizations, so small and medium-sized enterprises. And that's a group of organizations that we really do need to work out how we can encourage them to see the benefits of this, which I don't think will be a difficult task, but then how do we help them actually to get involved in determining how they can participate. For those organizations, and indeed larger organizations, the key thing I think at the moment comes to the financial performance of their organizations. So whether or not we think about energy, waste, water, and other environmental issues is certainly very important, and we mustn't lose sight of that. But for most organizations, I think a really good way into this is to say, well, if you think about those issues in terms of how your people will perform, and there are all sorts of associations between good performance environmentally and better performance in terms of productivity, health and well-being, for example, of occupants, then that, I think, as I've said, and you referred to, it will be an absolute game changer to make businesses be better businesses through having and occupying better buildings.
Well, the market stops right here, so James, back to you. No, I don't have a clue. I don't know what the market's ready for. And nor do my friends here.
That's a very honest answer. No, I was just going to throw it back out for another question to the audience.
Thank you. My name is Sasha Maranjak. I am university professor and director of PPP Center, which is a consulting company in Croatia. I'm not representing any certification scheme, but I want to actually raise a few questions and structure the discussion about what you wanted to achieve today. So, first, I was involved partially in SUMOT UK research project, which investigated and defined that at the moment, maybe now it's even more, there are 675 tools which in some ways want to assess sustainability in construction sector. Mr. Frank very well pointed that depending on what you want to show off, you define what tool you want to select. So I think what you raised today, that the proposal of European Commission might go to the area about not, of course, to develop new indicators. There are many indicators defined even in the regulations, but maybe to define what is from the, let's say, European Union stakeholders' value point, what are the values, what we want to actually follow and estimate or achieve in our buildings. From this one, we define from huge list of indicators in all these certification schemes what we really want to actually measure. Then maybe to define not set of, for example, 20 indicators, but to develop 2, 3, 5 composite indicators, which each of them might include list of lower level indicators, how we could actually see from European point of, from any building in Croatia, France, Italy, where we are, which way we are going, and how far we are from where we want to be in our buildings in future, not now. So my question is, my proposition is then to think and to take from stakeholder value point of view, what indicators are we interested, whether we should develop composite indicators, and whether we should call it sustainable and focus only on environmental impact. Why not to include as well social impact assessment and economic impact assessment with our mental impact assessment, and we really develop the framework for sustainable construction or for sustainable buildings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, in a certain way, you have well summarized. One of the ideas is, from our side, is not that we we define every single indicator. It's the main targets that we are interested. What you consider here, this is what the stakeholders are interested in. We are also a stakeholder as the European Commission, dealing with different aspects from energy efficiency to resource efficiency, etc. The second part is then going to the level where we say, okay, and these are the main indicators. How the details look like, exactly then this number of indicators that contribute to the main part, this is a technical issue. This is something that is solved in, as it was already mentioned, partly in standardization at the European level. It's partly tackled with the different private schemes. So we want to set the cornerstones and say, this is the most important part. This is where everybody should work on the harmonization, on the comparison of the information as such. And then we stop here. The second part is, you mentioned, of course, sustainability, and whatever word we use. I mean, sustainability is something nice because everybody knows the word, everybody has a complete different idea what it is. So we can always talk about it because nobody is absolutely wrong in this case. I would say you are right, and as not as a civil engineer, now as a sociologist, I would also say, and it was mentioned here exactly, this idea of how people feel in the building has a huge effect on practically on the efficiency and how much the building is then, how often the tenants are moving, how often the workforce is sick, etc., etc. These are important things. But first we have to learn to walk before we start to run. So we start step by step. That doesn't mean we exclude things. We just have to work on certain elements first. The first one was energy efficiency. This is now the flagship. Everybody knows it. There is a technical knowledge here, and we can relatively easily work with it. Then we go step by step to the other elements. And sooner or later, we will reach exactly all the elements that might be sustainability. Maybe in 20 years already our perception of this whole concept of buildings might have also changed. But we are doing it step by step. We are not forgetting it. We just need time to do one step after another. And we are not just rushing into one thing, have a nice, beautiful picture about one indicator. We have to be sure that when we go, for example, to resource efficiency, which is the aim of the communication, that we have a solid basis and we can actually work with it in the end, and not just a blah blah around it.
Can I ask the question? Thank you very much, Manfred. And there was a question about how are we tracking our performance at a kind of a macro level. And I'm going to put that question to Josefina. You know, how are we tracking? How are we doing? It's very relevant to the discussion we're going to have in the next section. How are we collecting data and tracking it? And then I'm going to come to Piet, who I'm sure will have some thoughts on that from those slides you showed.
That was the only question so far that I didn't want. And I didn't even get to choose. I mean, we will have a discussion on this on the building level, or on the building level. We will have a discussion on this in the breakout session. But if you're rather thinking of on the macro level and how we are tracking this kind of information on resource use, resource efficiency at the EU level, it is true that we have, of course, by far the most information, again, on energy consumption in the use phase. We have, of course, some initiatives exist, and some countries do quite well also when it comes to looking at the embodied energy. But most buildings, even most new built buildings, we don't have much information on that. If we look at the information that we have on waste generation, construction and demolition waste. If we look at water consumption also, it is really very scattered. The statistics, the information that we have is generally very poor, and we are left with a lot of gaps, and we are guessing, not just gaps in time, but also gaps in even if I just choose 1 year, you know, it's very limited. Also, not just the waste generation, but how do we manage that waste and so on. So we don't have a very good picture, I'm afraid. Otherwise, it would be maybe easier to conclude upfront what would be the key elements to look at. But we really need to draw information from many different places and try to fill the gaps with different kinds of clever guesses, I would say.
Yes, to follow up on that, and also what I'm really interested mostly in is this: what movement does the industry itself reach without actually having the EU or national governments to say, well, you should do this. I'm interested in incentives that work on the industry level and so the profit motive to drive people forward. And so in that sense, it's not so strange that businesses already look a lot at energy, because energy costs are high, and electricity is getting more expensive, and gas is more expensive, and that means that there's really a cost incentive to do something about it. Now, of course, the human capital incentive is even bigger, but there's a big cost incentive. If I look at waste, and especially with water, that's so cheap. I mean, you can waste water almost for free. And so you could be the most environmentally sensible water saver on the planet, and it doesn't probably make you any money. So I think one thing that we should do, maybe even more importantly than setting standards for measuring water use and stuff like that, is actually increasing the cost of water to its full cost, and then giving businesses incentive to perform better on the water management, and then business itself will want to have measures of water use and wastage and stuff like that. And probably that's a better incentive than saying, well, we're just going to measure it. But just the measurement is fine. You need to measure before you can do something. But without incentives, then probably businesses still won't do much. Well, okay.
So not just measurement incentives. Frank, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, James. Well, I will have just a short answer to indicators. I have a feeling that since 10 years, we have worked from the top. What can we technically measure? And that's why we have invented the kilowatt per square meter per year, because this is the easiest thing that we can measure. 15 years ago, we didn't have it. We didn't spoke about kilowatt per square meter per year. We spoke about how much power I had in a square meter of office. When I started to work 20 years ago, the indicator for the quality of a building was, do I have 150 watt per square meter installed? So you saw the shift. So I will go to what was said by Piet. We need to have incentives, and the most important incentive is the trust that can have in the measurement, so it can. For me, the indicators, we have to go back, not from what we can measure, but what the people are asking. The people in the building, in the residential, the workers in the offices and whatever, and what they want us to measure in order to assess the quality and the performance of a building. And I will just give you an example from a survey that will be released in the next week in France. It's the correlation between the energy performance certificate and the value of individual housing. And we have, again, a very clear correlation between the quality of the APC and the value of a house. And this is clearly to say that if you give a quality tag to something, whatever it is, an EPC is not very certain as a measurement, but people are taking this quality tag and implement this quality tag into their way how to give a value to something. So this is, I think, the way we have to think about of the indicators. Does it giving value to the choice I will make? And that's why I will ask that the indicators should be based on how we do choices.
We've just got the discussion started. There are lots more questions. But we did this for a reason, because we are going to break out now into further discussion sessions. So everybody's just got their energy up. Hold those questions. So the way that this next...